This meeting is in accordance with the executive orders from the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 943-248-64034. Maybe that's one too many digits. This information is also available on the published agenda, in the public notices section of the city website, and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN Channel 16, AT&T Channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Is that the right meeting ID, Gelman? It's got one more digit in it than it usually does. 943.
Hang on, I'll tell you in a hot second, the one that he sent me. It's 943-248-64034, and that's again 943-2486-4034.
Okay, no, that's good. So I stated the correct one at the beginning. It's got one more digit than they usually have. Well, I guess the Zoom universe is expanding. Okay, so I call this meeting to order. Galen, would you read the land heritage statement?
Sure will. Land heritage statement. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ottawa, Ojibwe, Bodewodni, and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost other property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from indigenous people. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals. And that's the land heritage statement.
All right, thank you, Galen.
You're welcome.
Would you start the roll call?
Sure. Okay, just 1 second. All righty. Commissioner Graham. Commissioner Graham.
I'm here.
Commissioner Skinner. Commissioner Skinner. Okay. Commissioner Needham. Commissioner Needham.
Here, sorry.
All righty. Councilmember Dish. Councilmember Dish.
Here.
Commissioner Gibb Randall.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Right. Councilmember Griswold.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Collywart.
Here.
Chairman Brown.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Commissioner Overpeck.
Listen.
All right. Commissioner Mursky.
Here, attending from Ann Arbor.
All righty. Commissioner Bundia.
Here from Ann Arbor.
All right. And Commissioner Ferris. All right. That's our roll call. We have a quorum.
And I'm here too.
Rita.
Rita? Oh,
In Ann Arbor.
Vice Chair Mitchell. My apologies.
It's okay.
All right, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Galen. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve it? Lisa, do I have a second? Kathy Griswold? We're open for discussion now. Does anybody wish to change it or no changes? Okay, I hear nothing. So all who approve of the agenda as written, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, the agenda passes unanimously. We changed last month, we changed the order of our agenda. So this starts the first public commentary period. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 1-888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 943-248-64034. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And be patient. There is a delay of up to 30 seconds before a connection is established. Thank you. Galen, is anyone on the line yet?
Yes, we have one caller, caller 534. Yes, and they want to speak.
Okay, bring them on.
Oh, okay, caller 534, go ahead and speak. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, this is Tom Stolberg. I'm calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor. And I want to talk about the natural features impacts of the proposed amendments to the ADU ordinance. I sent you all a letter earlier today. I don't know if you've all had a chance to read it. It's lengthy. I won't go over it all right now, but just give some highlights and some background on this issue. There are extensive changes proposed to the ADU ordinance, which, especially when taken collectively, have significant impacts that have not adequately been addressed at the planning staff and planning commission level. Citizens have called for further citizen participation. That call was turned down. 2 years ago, similar changes that were less impactful were brought to council, again with planning commission recommendation and the public asking for further engagement and education of the public. Planning declined, but 2 years ago, City Council wisely said that without better education and engagement of the public, these issues weren't being addressed properly and voted it down. So we've had 2 years to educate and engage the public, and that did not properly occur. So we have some unforeseen things that are coming up that members of the public are examining, and we want to bring one of those to your attention, and that's the rear yard trees. So currently, any accessory structure, picture a one-car garage detached in the back of a lot, can be 3 feet from the side yard or rear yard setback. That's a detached structure. If you have one, you can convert it to a habitable structure now under the current ordinance. But you can't create a new habitable accessory dwelling unit 3 feet from the lot line if you don't currently have one. So we're about to change that if council passes this. So about 20,000 lots would be able to build a habitable structure, some up to 600 square feet, some up to 800 square feet, depends on the lot size. But a typical R1C lot will be able to build an 800 square foot habitable unit within 3 feet of the rear and side yard setbacks. So imagine what that can do to the rear yard trees and the side yard trees. Imagine what that does to the trees that are on the neighbor's lot. If you build that close to the lot line, I've done development. I can picture what it takes to cut branches off one side of a tree, to disturb the root zone of a tree. You're going to kill trees on the neighbor's lot, if not completely disturb them. Plus the trees on the rear yards of this lot that you want to put your ADU in. Some of us said, well, why don't we make the setback a little further? A typical R1C setback is 30 feet already. So what if it was 15 feet? And I asked some people who are professionals in this business, what they felt was adequate. And they concurred about 15 feet, but we don't have to settle on 15 if you have other ideas. But in essence, what is the setback from the rear yard lot line that would protect the trees that are existing there? And also when you start taking down trees and grading the lots and creating additional impervious surface and removing trees that soak up stormwater, we have to deal with the stormwater issues. So maybe there's some things that could be required, like rain gardens and other stormwater management issues that simply haven't had enough discussion yet. And I think you're the right body to at least have that discussion. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Stolberg. Duly noted. And I did receive your email earlier today through Rita Mitchell.
Thank you.
Is anybody else on the line?
There's no one else.
Okay. Okay, this will be the last call for public comment. Okay, well, let's move on to special presentations. The first item on the agenda is a mapping of Ann Arbor by Anthony Bedone. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, Bedone.
Bedone, yeah. Oui, c'est français. Okay, so you have the floor, Tony.
Oh, wonderful. Let me go ahead and start by sharing my screen. However, that's been disabled at this time.
Galen, can you enable that?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Galen.
Yep, you're welcome.
Talking about a map is not nearly as effective as showing one.
So a bit of introduction for Tony here.
Sure, Christopher, go ahead.
Our natural features map, such as it was a print about half the size of a wall in a conference room at City Hall for the last 19 years. And I don't know how it came to pass, and you should tell us, Tony, but somehow he got assigned or took up the project to make our natural features map, which is a multiple layers of steep slopes, wetlands, woodlands, floodplains, waterways, etc., in a digital format that could be accessed by the public. And I think it was last fall that he did this. And in addition to having the natural features layers, which you see across the city in front of you right now, and can manipulate by turning on and off layers, there are behind these things photos going all the way back to 1947. So Tony's going to show you this, and I'm so excited that this is available to the people of Ann Arbor. It's an extraordinary educational tool about what we have here in terms of natural features, and it will give us guidance in what we can do and shouldn't do. Go for it, Tony.
I certainly hope so. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. So, like I said, my name is Tony Bedone. I'm the senior application developer for the city of Ann Arbor for GIS developer. I sit in the IT office. I've been with the city 4 years. So how did it come to pass? So we are branding what we're calling Map Ann Arbor. We've been branding what we've been calling Map Ann Arbor for almost a decade now, but we're really making an effort to put these public map viewers in the hands of anybody that will use them. This one is natural resources focused, obviously, as Chris says. I'll be honest, some of this information is housed within the city. Much of it is really in the public domain, federal resources, state resources, regional resources, and some of the like. So what a technology like Map Ann Arbor allows us to do is compile information from a variety of sources and make it available in a nice, neat, easy to use, hopefully easy to use, bundled viewer for all of you. So this is a public web viewer. It's not exclusive to the Environmental Commission or residents of Ann Arbor. If you know this URL, you can access this from an internet connection. This is version 2.3. So Chris and I have been through a few iterations of this. It's based on one of the latest map viewer technologies we have access to. And this, like a lot of the Map Ann Arbor viewers, we have a commitment to maintain. So with that being said, I will just jump into showing the functionality. This is meant to be interactive. So I'm going to show a few things. I think Chris has some ideas for discussion, but I'm also happy to take questions and take notes for potential future improvements. We know there's limitations, but there always is with every tech. So it's supposed to work well on a phone. The other thing is we host this ourselves. So you'll see this long URL up here, and without getting too techy, what this basically means is we have the ability to track web metrics on this application, and we can tell who's using it, how they're using it, when they're using it, from what device, from all kind of things like even SES of the people using it and stuff like that. So it's actually kind of cool. We're starting to put metric trackers on most of our city websites, but for my focus, almost all of our GIS web pages are starting to have this. And so it's not something we've always had in Ann Arbor, but it's something we're doing going forward. It's in our GIS strategic plan to track the usage metrics of all web applications, mapping applications. So I will talk about the base map gallery first that Chris alluded to. So this is, you start out with the standard base map, but there's a number of different base maps to choose from. This is, I'll zoom in a little bit. This one's plat focused. So it kind of takes into consideration stuff you would see on a traditional plat map, like dimensions and plat information. And then we have a topo focus one. So these are 1 foot contours that came from the 2018 initiative. And so these, as you zoom in a little bit closer, you can see the indexes. So that's what we have here. And then, oops, I'll get to layers in a moment. And then we have a whole host of different photographs in here, dating back, like Chris said, back to 1947. So you can kind of see how Ann Arbor changed over time. These started as you can see, paper or Mylar maps in a drawer. And so we've scanned them in over the years and georeferenced them. Obviously, this one's not georeferenced perfectly. I didn't pick this area on purpose. So there is, so we can go all through the years. So there's even infrared imagery where we have it available for the more recent years. Like here's our 2020 imagery, which we took hold of back in October. This was flown in April. It's very eerie because if you zoom to some of the parking lots in Ann Arbor, not many people were moving around in April of 2020. So lots of empty parking lots, something that will stand the test of time. The other thing baked into here is we do have one for topo. So if you're somebody that wants to look at topography and aerials at the same time, that's available to you. And then we have our traditional standard ortho imagery for 2020. So the concept here is that you can pick and choose from these different base maps, and I'll show the print functionality in a little bit, how that can pass through into your prints. So those are the base layers. And then this is what we call overlay layers. So these, again, like I said, come from a variety of different sources. This is from the National Wetlands Inventory and a resource from the state. So this is compiled by our systems planning unit as what they deem to be important to know about wetlands. So there's really not any information about the botanicals of the given wetlands because some are from the state's wetland inventory and some are from the National Wetland Inventory. So really this is just an absence or presence of wetland. So there's no detail in this one per se. Woodlands is a historic layer in Ann Arbor, and this was traced off an older version of a photograph. So in the 90s. So admittedly, this one's a little bit out of date. Then we have our floodplain information that comes directly from FEMA. This is from the 2012. I believe I sat and spoke to this commission a few months ago with Jerry Hancock, and we showed the floodplain viewer. And so maybe that's where some of you have met me before, but essentially this is the same information. So here's our 500 year, or it's what they used to call it for us old schoolers, but now it's called the 0.2%. And then this is the 100-year floodplain here. And then this is obviously the floodway. So if you go to our floodplain viewer, you can get a lot more specifics about floodplain, but this is just supposed to be the basics. Next, we have our street tree inventory. I know we have Tiffany on the call here, and so she's much more knowledgeable than I about the street tree inventory, but essentially this is our most up-to-date street tree inventory we have. It's a live feed, so as we're managing this street inventory as a city forestry unit, the data is on this viewer for everybody to enjoy. And we have just a couple of attributes available with the balloon. This is one that has a balloon pop up, so a little bit of species information and the diameter breast height in range. And you can actually see this icon grows a little bit based on the DBH. So the bigger the tree leaf, the bigger the DBH. So what else going on? These are some other pieces of information actually from our NAP unit. Sometimes we categorize stuff as other public owned natural areas. For example, there's some county stuff on here. Let me try to find County Farm Park. I think that might show up in purple or not. So here we go. Yeah, here's some of that. So did these break it into populations? Is that what's going on here, Chris? I forget exactly what we had going on here.
That's school property there.
So I think what we tried to do is, so the NAP unit has traced some of these natural areas. So yes, this is school property, but this is environmentally specific, I believe. I can give more detail about what the purple layer is. I'll be honest with you. I'm not 100%. And then we have our urban tree canopy, which obviously students are going to talk about in a little bit. This is our past urban tree canopy layer that dates back to 2012-ish era, but you're going to learn about today in a little while here, the update and modernization of such. Once that happens, obviously we'll be delivering the new and improved urban forest. And whether we call it an urban tree canopy or just a tree canopy, we can talk about that, but that'll obviously be available on the viewer. And then lastly, this is soils. This comes from the old soil surveys, and they're put into these standard classifications for hydrologic classification. Some of you are familiar with this in the environmental sector, A through D, and then Phil. So this is, if you zoom out, this is actually a county-wide resource. And this actually is hosted with Washtenaw County, but we're partners with them, obviously. So we're also making that available on the viewer. So that's the functional layers. And then I'll just quickly show printing, and then I'll take questions. So if you were to turn on a few of these things that you're interested in, for example, maybe wetlands and street trees, and some of this stuff doesn't draw till you get into a certain scale for functionality reasons of the website. You can't draw every single layer at the max scale, otherwise it slows the system down too much. But the concept here is that there's this measurement widget, which is just for you to use and enjoy and measure area, grab a coordinate perhaps, or grab a distance. And that's kind of for you to, if you're doing some planning, you can use that tool. What is in here, let me turn that widget off, sorry. Clear that. And so the print widget, this is relatively new to the viewer. We released this at version 2.13 and we're at 2.15. So what you can do now is export a couple different formats that you see here. Obviously PDF's really common. So you can do just the map, but there's also a few layouts available. So I'll focus on this, like an Ansi landscape layout, and you can get into the advanced properties here. And if you don't know what scale you're at, you can press this current button. It'll grab in that's a representative fraction. Not everybody works in representative fraction. That's 1 unit on the map is 600 units on the earth, which is 1 inch is 50 feet. So you take this number and you divide it by 12 if you want to do inch to feet. Some of you might be familiar with that. Some of you might not. So what you'll get out of that, if you can force your scale. And Chris and I were talking about how that's nice to have. And whatever layers you have turned on or off in the viewer will pass through. You can type notes in here. You can put your name. You can decide to represent the scale bar in feet or metric if you're interested in that. and then you can go ahead and print this. And what it does, it generates a quick PDF that's available in the context of this browser refresh. So if you leave the browser and come back, it's not going to keep your PDF. But once you get done with it, you can open it and you can download this PDF. So there's that map to scale. There's my 1:600 or 1 inch is 50 feet. And, you know, I happen to have the wetlands turned on and the street trees turned on. So that's what passed through into my legend down here. So, and what didn't used to work, which does work now, if you do have a photograph turned on, you can create that same, so I can create yet another print. So I can keep my first print that I created. And here's my second print. It's always going to be called this Ann Arbor Natural Features. Obviously the photo ones take a little bit longer, but there's the photo one right there. And the same legend, it prints the time, and see, there's my notes I put down there. So yeah, that's what I had. Any comments or questions?
So perhaps you could go to Furstenberg Park, which
Yep.
is
You guys are going to test me. I know where stuff is, kind of.
here in Parkway.
Yeah, I got to drive over there. So let's see, I would probably drive
You had it right.
right in here, right?
Yeah. So back up a bit and turn on 1960 air photo.
I can do that. And I can turn off some of these wetlands perhaps.
So maybe you can shut the layer list and back out a bit here.
Absolutely. Just
There you
try.
go. So over on the left, and down all of these hills is the Arboretum and Forest Hill Cemetery.
Mhm.
And much of those trees are what are now our native forest fragments. These are trees, and they show up on the woodland inventory, but without any discrimination about species or plant communities. And we may learn something about that. And then going back to the east toward Furstenberg, this entire valley in here, oh my goodness. So this is before Gallup Pond was excavated. Some of you remember in 1968, the Dixboro Dam blew out. And as a result of that, dewatering of the river, which is more or less what you see here, they were able to get into the bottom of the river and move soil out of there and make islands and make the pathways and make a much bigger pond, which is now silting in as fast as it can go. But
So you can pass through time as we come up with more imagery. I mean, I feel like we've combed through all the Mylar drawers we've had, but I hear rumors about more imagery around. But if we come across it, or one of you comes across it, we can work together to get it added in the viewer. We'd love to have that as a resource.
so now you see the Huron Parkway Bridge in the middle 60s, and built right through the Miller Creek wetland, which was a terrific pen, which they really drained to. In the top, just right of the Huron Parkway, Geddes Road intersection is the Ruthven Tame, which is a very interesting natural area with a lot of grasslands on it because it's just a big pile of sand. You can see orchards.
Yes, you can.
There were many in Ann Arbor. If you go...
What does that look like today, that orchard? Looks like a neighborhood.
Yeah, it does. All the trees are, almost all the trees are gone. Fence rows showing though with native trees in them. The river edge where there's a steep slope. And if you turn on your topo, you'll see the steep slope there.
Yep.
There you go.
Well, again, you can't see the topo till you get in nice and tight, but
Very steep, as you can see.
very, very steep.
And those areas were never farmed, and so they have big oak trees on them, native forest fragments, we call them, and probably the cicadas are climbing out of the ground just as we speak and beginning to talk in those areas. 1960 is probably better than 47, but you never know. So what's wonderful about this
Viewer.
this technology, this service the city is providing us is the ability to look backward and forward, to see how the landscape changed, to see where our native forest fragments are and where they've been built under, and see where they still exist intact, to see how the use of the land has changed. It's, as I've said multiple times when we've seen this and I've talked about it and shown it, I'm very excited. Thank you, Tony.
Well, thank you, Chris, for being excited. And so I share this with you all so you can be knowledgeable that this resource exists and other mapping resources. Share them with the teams you work with. Provide us feedback, because it's with your feedback that these viewers get better and better. And, shoot big, because a lot of this stuff can be now visualized in these viewers, and we can share resources from bigger and smaller entities. And we're already doing that with the county and the state. So just know that that type of collaboration is possible through this tech. And it takes you to use it to find out what you can use it for and what you can't use it for.
I
Okay.
should say you're looking at the Earhart Orchard.
You know what this is?
So the Earhart Mansion was not long after this orchard was planted, and there's a very interesting story in that corner of the city.
Okay, yeah. No, thank you, Anthony. This is wonderful.
Yeah, great. So
Great resource.
do you guys want to share? So this is the long URL, but there's actually a short URL, which I don't know if Galen will let me put it in the chat or not, but it's a2gov.org/A2 natural features. So it's not very complicated, and it'll do a redirect. So a2gov.org/A2 natural features, all one word.
Okay, that was one of my questions.
Yep.
The other is which browsers do you recommend using?
Well, it works in all of them. IE not as well, but this new viewer series of technology we're using is compatible with all of them. Safari, Firefox, even the new Edge that's out. So I'm using Chrome right now. That's personally my favorite, but it'll work in pretty much any of them. It doesn't work as well on a phone. I mean, it's mobile responsive, but it works best in a browser.
Well, yeah, I expect so. All right. Well, thank you. We have a number of questions here.
Yeah, I don't want to take all night, please.
Okay, Tony, please stay for a minute. Galen just had some technical problems, and he asked for you to pass the hostship
I can do
on
that.
either to me or to Steve.
Well, let
That's
would we-
me.
I can
Okay.
certainly try to do that. So let me stop my sharing here. And
All right. Thank you, Tony.
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So we have some questions. We have some hands up here.
Whoops.
Ask
so-
them as I fuddle through this host thing. Go ahead and ask.
Okay. So John Mursky, and then Kathy, I think, had her hand up next, and then Shannon.
Thanks, Tony. Great presentation and great work for the city. A couple of quick questions, hopefully. Geographic boundaries. I mean, if I'm interested or someone's interested in heading over and using this towards Ypsilanti or Chelsea, at what point does information drop off? And then the second question is, it may not be in the public domain, but does the city have GIS maps and data for other kinds of things like city infrastructure and things like that?
We have a plethora. So to answer your first question, I work for the city. You have to draw the line somewhere, right? There are countywide viewers. The county has a very successful GIS program as well, and Map Washtenaw exists, and there's many resources on there. We kind of share the same base back-end infrastructure. So, I mean, the way these photos are cached and the way the base maps are cached, I do about a 2 to 3 mile boundary around the outer perimeter of the city, and then that's all we have. And when we contract for new imagery, we only go out so far for obvious reasons.
Okay.
So I will host everything I have access to, but the line does end. And then as far as what other resources we have tons of resources. Not all of our viewers are in the public domain because of security constraints, but pretty much all interested parties can have password access. And we have many of our layers available on the Ann Arbor data catalog for download. So students and researchers can compile their own. And then of course, there's always contact me and my team member, John Radsky from IT, and we'll get with you and hand you data if we have to. I mean, we're, so much of it is around. If you just Google it, you can find it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
But check out Map Washtenaw too. I mean, that's what I'd say.
Yeah.
If you haven't already.
Okay, Kathy.
I am not able to pass the host. It's not letting me. It says I don't have access to do that. So I will hang out.
Well, Kathy?
Please hang
Thank
out.
you very
I'll-
much. I get excited about data visualization, given that I've been studying it since before computers, or at least desktop computers. One question regarding your layer for wetlands. Would that be considered wetlands that cannot be built upon? And I'm thinking about ADUs. I don't know if anyone can answer that.
So I would say it's managed by the systems planning unit. So Jerry, you guys obviously know Jerry. He is kind of the champion of that piece of information. So instead of just using an off-the-shelf resource like the Federal National Wetlands Inventory, we at the team of Ann Arbor, systems planning has compiled this resource of what you just said, places we don't want development to happen. And I would say this wetland layer is more restrictive for environmental reasons than just your traditional off-the-shelf National Wetland Inventory. But I would reach out to Jerry from systems planning to get the full facts on that.
Okay, Jerry Hancock?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So
it's like National Wetlands Inventory Plus.
Okay.
yeah, and there's size kind of restrictions and things like that, Kathy, for that, in terms of in terms of the real regulatory world about what you can build on and not. But it's also just generally not good practice to build in a wetland because the soils usually are terrible for that kind of thing. So this gives people an easier way to be able to know if they have hydric soils in their backyard. So that would be really important in terms of planning.
Yes.
So it seems, so I use Map Washtenaw every day, Tony, and it's such a fabulous resource. And I am so excited to see this too. When you were moving around, two things struck me that seemed different. One is the scale. It looked like you were able to zoom in closer than Map Washtenaw. Am I right about that? And two, the resolution also looked way more crystal clear with this than Map Washtenaw. And am I right about that too?
You're right in both regards. Thank you for noticing. Some of you may know, I know you know, Shannon, I used to be a county employee for 17 years.
Yep.
And then I jumped over to our team. But the reality is the size of Washtenaw County in comparison to the size of Ann Arbor, we're able to produce stuff more resolute without using as many computer resources. So that goes to what John was just saying about the scale. But we've also put some extra love and heart into this to do what the other one can't. So we do have higher res and we do go down to 1 to 240 for our tightest scale.
That is super exciting and I think that this will play into I hope our discussion around ADUs, because it makes it so much easier for people to be able to zoom in and see their lot and then understand some of the resources that are on their lot too, that the city may care about in terms of planning and stuff like that. So it's great that this is coming on board right now. So people can have just access to information that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
So it's super exciting that you all are doing this, and I can't wait to get my mouse into it.
We're going to be promoting our other viewers. I mean, one of our strategic planning goals, which you'll see later this year, is we're going to have like a one-stop map page. We have one, but it's not as organized. We need to readdress it. So it's very, very organized and all viewers are in the same place. Mm-hmm. So all of our residents and folks doing business in and around Ann Arbor can get to all these maps. You can't have one map that has everything in it.
Right.
But, sometimes you got to use multiple pieces, but
right. Yeah, well, this just looks super exciting. So thank you for all your work on this.
Oh, thank you guys. I wish I could pass the host back so you guys could continue your meeting, but
I just
can
I think I can.
continue.
I think I can fix that. I should have access to the OSI
Perfect.
Zoom account as well, so I can leave and then log back in with that account.
thank you, Sean.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. So are there any other questions for Tony?
Tony, I had a question about impervious surface. I don't know if you covered that or if I missed it, or is that something
I
that's
didn't
included
cover
in
it.
the layers?
No, so we have an impervious surface viewer, a2gov.org/a2 stormwater. So that's actually built on our older viewer platform. So it's the same GIS, but a different front face. So that exists, and we are going to be using the 2020 imagery we received last fall to take another poke at Impervious. But right now, it's the 2018 Impervious that's available on that viewer. And there's also some really interesting stuff on that viewer, like if you're able to get credits on your property for participating in, best management practices and rain gardens and stormwater management and stuff. So that information's available on there, along with the impervious from our last 2 years from 15 and 18. So the plan is to move that forward to 18 and 20, and then we'll probably facelift it and use this new viewer format. That's it's on the plan to do in fall. So it'll be revised, but there is a viewer out there, a2gov.org/a2 stormwater.
Okay. Any other questions for Tony? Well, I just have a few more, Tony. One is that how often is this map updated? You have different version histories or something, right?
Yeah. So the base technology at this point isn't really updated all that often, but the information behind the map, as we get information, it live feeds into this. So things like aerials, we load in every 2 years or 3 years when we obtain them. But like street trees that the forestry team manages, as soon as the street tree is mapped in our base system, it's mapped on this map, and wetlands and all of the other stuff. Things like a floodplain and a soil, they don't change ever. So they're never updated. So the overall viewers are looked at usually on an 18-month cycle. And we use the web metrics and things like I was just talking about at the beginning of the meeting to see which web apps need more attention than others.
Okay.
So every 18 months, we kind of take another peek at them. Or if Chris emails me a bunch of times, that's another way to look at them.
Right. Okay, just one more question, and that is if a citizen discovers an error, how would they report it?
That's a really good question. I'm not 100% sure on this viewer if the pop-up exists, but we have a mapfeedback.a2gov.org email, mapfeedback.a2gov.org email, and that you can find that on the A2Gov page under the map data catalog. There's a link there, and so we at the GIS team see those emails and review them all the time. I have to make sure the link is on this site. I'm not sure if it is.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you so much, Tony.
Of course.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, gang.
What a work product. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to stick around and watch the students present on the other thing I'm interested in. So.
Okay.
So I'll mute myself.
So let's see. There are other presentations on the agenda. I don't see them. They're not on the agenda. Rita.
Oh yeah, right under second line there, climate change and creating a healthy and vibrant community in Ann Arbor. Probably you're gonna have to admit him in, Galen. I don't see him on the screen here yet.
Sorry, let me make Rita and Stephen hosts. They know what they're doing.
Okay.
That's you, Sean, right? Okay.
How do you make two people host?
Okay. It says I'm a host. Now, I do not know how to do this.
Rita, have you done this before?
I have not, and I
right.
don't see the people that are supposed to be here. Thank you, Tiffany.
They may need to be admitted to the meeting.
Yep. If
They'll
you
be under attendees. So if you click participants, Rita, down at the bottom, if you move your
I
mouse,
see that. Yep.
okay, it pops open a window.
Yep.
16 panelists, 7 attendees. Go to attendees.
Aha. Got
Okay.
it.
Click
Yes.
on Thomas's name. There should be more.
Allowed to talk.
There should also be
And-
promote to panelists.
All
it.
5 of
Got
those,
him.
or 4 of those anyway.
So do it for all
Ansi.
of those people.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Christian. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Is Bill Shikora also to be in?
I don't know that name, so I don't know.
recognize the
Okay. And
name.
there's an Alyssa Sklar.
Yep, she is.
She is.
Okay. And
Hi, Thomas.
There.
Is there a Bill in your group? I don't think so, right? Okay.
okay. And I see 2 phone numbers, so I think those are on the side.
I think everyone's here.
Great.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thanks so much.
Chris, do you want to do an intro of this group?
So, Thomas, I hope you'll lead the way, but I hope your group will introduce themselves and give a little about their background and what you're studying, and then what you all seeking to do as a project for master's students at the School of Environment and Sustainability. Go for it, Thomas.
Absolutely. All right, let me go ahead and get screen sharing going over here. Pull up presenter view, and it says I'm not allowed to screen share.
Yeah, Rita, you're going to need to make Thomas the host.
Tiffany, I'm glad you're here.
Rita, you're muted.
All right.
Thomas, it says you're the host. See if you can do that now.
Sounds good. All right, can everyone see my screen here?
We can.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, and I think, is it Lindsay or Alyssa, are you starting us off?
Yeah, I'll start us off. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to an overview and brief description of our master's project for the School for Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan, in which we will be characterizing Ann Arbor's urban tree canopy. Next slide, please. Before we delve into some of these details for the project, we will introduce ourselves.
All right, everyone. My name is Thomas Estabrook. I'm originally from Central Illinois, and I got my undergraduate at Grinnell College in Iowa. I just finished my first year here at SEAS, and I'm in the geospatial data science track.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christian Schluter. I'm originally from Massachusetts. I graduated from Salem State Community College in 2018 with a degree in geography. I'm now attending SEAS to get my master's in geospatial data science.
Then, hi, I'm Alyssa Sklar. I'm originally from Eastern Pennsylvania. I graduated last year from DePaul University with my BA in geography, concentrating in GIS and geotechnology. And now I am a dual degree master's student, first at SEAS. I'm in the geospatial data sciences track, and then as well as the School of Information, where I'm studying librarianship and archival practices.
And I'm Lindsay. I come from Washington State, and I studied mathematics at University of Portland, where I graduated in 2019. And I came out to Ann Arbor to study geospatial data science, like all of my teammates.
So first off, we'd like to briefly review some background information on the importance of tree canopy coverage and the conservation of forest fragments. Tree canopy provides multiple benefits to the local area, such as preventing the acceleration of stormwater runoff, which in turn slows erosion of the surrounding land. The presence of trees has also been shown to lower the average temperature of their environment, particularly in urban areas that otherwise would see very little shade. Canopies provide a habitat for local wildlife, and on a broader scale, trees are carbon fixing, meaning that they capture and store carbon that would otherwise occupy our atmosphere. Native forest fragments provide additional benefits to the surrounding land. Native trees are generally better equipped to survive in their local climate, which makes them more likely to survive and thrive here. They are also more integrated with the local ecosystem, which means that they often provide food, shelter, seeds, and other resources for native fauna that otherwise may not be provided by non-native or younger forests. The city has had surveys performed in the past to determine Ann Arbor's canopy coverage, most notably the partnership with Davie Resource Group and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources to conduct an iTree analysis in 2012. The results of the analysis revealed Ann Arbor to have approximately 1.45 million trees at the time, removing about 405 tons of carbon annually. In addition, Davie Resource Group produced an inventory of the city's street trees, recording metrics such as tree species and size, as we saw in the earlier presentation.
So right now for our project, we have some data of the urban tree canopy. Like Christian said, the street trees. We also have data from Nichols Arboretum, as well as the university's campus canopies. And additionally, we do have some information on shrubbery and grasses at Black Pond Woods as well. On this map, also highlighted is different locations of parks, natural areas, and the golf courses in the orange color that we intend on sampling to fill in some of these gaps of the canopy data, and we will continue to elaborate on this throughout our presentation.
So we have three main goals that we intend to achieve through this project. First, we intend to use remote sensing data to create a comprehensive GIS layer of Ann Arbor's urban tree canopy that can be added to the Ann Arbor Natural Features inventory. Second, we will use an open source statistical computing software package such as Python or R to develop a script that uses one or more open source machine learning algorithms to reliably classify trees by species and estimate biomass from multiple input data sets, including LiDAR. And third, in dialogue with local experts, we will develop a story map that translates the findings of our canopy map and biomass calculations into terms that are useful for public and private land managers who will be making stewardship decisions regarding Ann Arbor's trees.
So the question now is, what methods are we actually going to use to create this comprehensive map of the city's trees and their biomass? And obviously, manually locating, identifying, and weighing all of the city's million-plus trees is out of the question. But thankfully, we have access to several remotely sensed data sets, including 3D LiDAR point clouds and high-resolution aerial photographs. Our aim is to harness the power of machine learning to create a computer model that, when fed these data sets, can locate, classify, and estimate the biomass of each tree in a given area. With enough computing power, we can then do this for the whole city and create a GIS layer for the entire urban canopy. In the images on the slide, we can see a few examples of the type of data we have. At bottom left is an example of the high resolution aerial photography taken by the USGS. On top is an example of a LiDAR point cloud. It's a 3D map basically where each dot represents a return from a laser scanner carried on an airplane. And so it gives us a 3D map of surface features, which we can use to identify individual trees within the canopy. And finally, at bottom right is an example of a secondary product derived from LiDAR. In this case, it's a map of individual tree crowns at the Arboretum. So on this slide, we have a rough outline of how we plan to implement machine learning for this project. Before breaking down the process, I want to briefly go into why it's appropriate for this task. In brief, one of the biggest advantages to machine learning is its versatility. What it's good at is taking whatever data is on hand and detecting statistical trends and differences that we might not even know to look for ourselves. So as long as the data we have captures some of the differences in between tree species, it's potentially useful for inclusion in a machine learning model. And thankfully, the data sets we are using should provide dozens of possible variables, giving us a very good chance at being able to tease out distinctions between tree species, or at least tree genuses. So what we ultimately want is a computer program that can take in all of those data sets on the previous slide and output a really good guess as to what type of tree is in a given image, and also give an estimate of its biomass. And in this, that's the gray box labeled classifier on this map. And because the types of trees that we're interested in are pre-existing categories, we're doing something called supervised classification. And this requires that we supply the computer with examples of each tree species, which are called training data. So in our case, this means that we need a data set of trees that have already been identified by species. And we'll go into more on how we're doing this in the next section. But when we have that, we can then feed these into a machine learning algorithm, which is the gray box there, which will then associate the information in the remote sensing data with the species labels that we gather on the ground, and then essentially build a program that can do this for other data that hasn't already been labeled. So training a machine learning model is an iterative process. There are many possible algorithms we could use, and each one has its own set of parameters that will need to be tweaked and tested. So the training data that we're going to be gathering will thus serve a dual purpose. Some of it will also be set aside to act as a testing data set so that we can compare the output of our classifier to things we've already classified ourselves. So for example, if the classifier repeatedly takes in remotely sensed data for what we already know is an oak tree, but says it's a maple, we have an indication that we need to go back and tweak the parameters we're using to train the algorithm better and teach it how to distinguish between those. So finally, after we've iterated through that training and testing process and reached an acceptable level of accuracy, we'll be able to feed into our classifier the entire data set for the whole city, not just those for the trees we've already identified ourselves. And this will allow us to produce a final map of tree species and biomass for the entire city. But with that said, as a team, we're still in the very early stage of this process. And so our focus for the summer right now is just on building up a really robust set of training data that covers all the possible tree types we might be encountering in Ann Arbor, just to ensure that we have a really good chance at building a really good model. And I will turn it over for more on that.
Yeah, so like Alyssa showed before in the map, as far as training data goes, we've gathered existing data like the Ann Arbor street tree data, the Nichols Arboretum stems, and we've gotten permission to use other data collected like the U of M campus trees. And so we looked at the geography of all of that and used it to identify gaps, which then informed our list of sample locations. And so now this summer, we're delving into the forested areas around Ann Arbor to identify canopy trees within randomly located 30 by 30 meter plots. And in the top right-hand corner, that shows some of the 4-letter codes of species we run into a lot. So lots of red oak, black cherry, and sugar maple so far. So then our current fieldwork update right now is that we've collected data at Black Pond Woods, Lily Park, and Bird Hills with a lot more locations to come. We've been really having a lot of fun out there, and especially on the hot days, we are very grateful for the canopy like this one at Bird Hills. And then looking forward, so right now we're gathering our training and testing data within Ann Arbor and simultaneously doing some data cleaning and preparation to put them into the models like Thomas explained. And then looking forward into the fall, we'll start testing different machine learning algorithms for the canopy classification. And then once we've reached acceptable accuracy on that, then we'd test biomass estimation models. And within, with our data and imagery, we'll also create a turf grass map. And then to wrap it all up, in the winter of 2022, we will compile all these data layers like the tree classification, turf grass map, biomass estimation into a web map, ideally. And then we'd also produce our final project report and present. And so before we open it up to questions or pass it on, we'd really like to thank the Environmental Commission for proposing this project and for having us here tonight. And thank you to the Office of Sustainability and Innovations for funding our summer work. And thank you to our advisors, Shannon Brines and Jason Talent. We are really grateful to have so much enthusiasm and support for us and for our project.
Very good.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. That was an excellent presentation. I see some hands up, Peck, and then Shannon.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see you on Zoom. I'm sad that you've been here for a whole year and I have yet to see you in person. As I'm sure you are sad that we had this kind of strange year, but really great to see what you're doing. I'm interested in the idea of course, you're going to be doing all of Ann Arbor, and you're going to be trying to balance essentially the amount of information you can have at any one location with the bigger scale of having to do the whole city. And I'm wondering, have you thought about maybe zooming in on some sites like Saginaw Forest, which is a C's property, to try and push the envelope with this machine learning algorithm to see how much better you could do if you really were able to go in and sample more trees. And the most interesting thing to me is, would it be possible, do you think, to get at tree health? You know, there are a lot of trees, say in Saginaw Forest, but certainly around Michigan. I don't know Ann Arbor as well as I should. There are a lot of trees. Well, there are oak trees here for sure. I know in my own yard that are dying because of certain diseases. And I know in Saginaw Forest, some of the trees were planted by forestry students long ago, and they're starting to die. And they're certainly not doing too well anymore. Some of the big pine trees, for example. And I wonder if the machine learning would allow you to map out tree health and get a sense of where trees are doing just fine and where they're not. And then the second question I have for you is, would you be, and you might not have time for this, but then to be able to dig in and see why are they not doing so well? Some are just getting really old. Some are getting a disease, an invasive pest or pathogen, and some might be affected by climate change. And the only reason I asked that last one is because Michigan is warming more than the nation as a whole. Interestingly enough, it's getting wetter more than the nation as a whole in terms of extreme precipitation. But at the same time, paradoxically, it's also drying out. And so we might start to see trees suffering much as they are out west, where it's much more obvious. So 2 questions. Can you get at health? And then will you have time to maybe understand, if you could get at health, why certain species are suffering?
So, go ahead, sorry. Okay, I can take this one. So for the first question, I can't answer definitively one way or another. The way you would probably go about it is when you're gathering your training data, you would want to go ahead and find some systematic way to label, each tree that you're measuring with a certain level of health, and if possible, if you want to be able to use remote sensing to get at why trees aren't doing well as well. For any tree that's not doing well, you would then create subcategories, and then you would try and train the model. And it's not guaranteed to work. The question would be if these changes in health produce differences that are measurable in terms of the way that they reflect light in different spectra that would show up on an aerial photo, for example, or the way that the LiDAR scanner would create a point cloud of that tree. And I can't say for sure. And we're all geospatial data science students on this team, so we don't have quite as much of the conservation ecology background maybe to address some of these questions, but it would really just depend on if the differences between healthy and unhealthy trees are in some way registered in the whatever data sets you're trying to train the model on. Because if they are, then with enough iterations and with the right tuning of parameters, a machine learning model should be able to pick up on it. And then you should be able to go ahead and feed it new data sets and get an estimation of which trees or what percentage of trees are doing badly or doing well.
Thanks.
There are a lot of different forest health issues that present a lot of the same symptoms. So you might see a thinning crown or leaves changing colors, and that could be a number of different issues. So something might be able to tell you that there's something going on with these trees, but it's not going to be able to tell you necessarily what, whether it could be simple leaf scorch or it could be oak wilt. You know what I mean? So it'd be really hard for a machine learning, as I understand this program right now, to be able to differentiate and identify what forest health impacts or issues we're having out there.
So, Shannon?
Yeah, so this is so cool. First of all, I just think this is great. I am curious about the same species of trees that presents in a really different way versus like when it's in open grown versus in a dense forest, and wondering if you can tell, like when you're feeding the information to machine learning algorithms, whether they can tell, are they looking at like really just sort of the leaves and sort of its signature, or is it also taking in information about form and size and things like that? Because, you know, a white oak at an open field may present really differently than a white oak that's super tall and skinny next to a bunch of other trees in a forest. And I'm just wondering if you all can get to that level of resolution to really be able to tell the difference, because different trees can present really differently in different situations.
So in general, as long as when you're gathering your training data and feeding it to the algorithm, as long as you tell it that both the canopy oaks and the field oaks are in the same class of oak, then the model should be able to adapt. It should be able to figure out that, okay, there's a broader variance and to answer your other question, with that 3D LiDAR data, we should be able to also include information about the overall volume of the crown and even the shape of the crown. There's some papers that, without getting too deep into the weeds, that look at some ways to very simply, you know, get, if you have an oak tree or a deciduous tree of equal volume to a conifer that's very cone-shaped, there's ways to distinguish between the two of them from LiDAR data. And so the key is just making sure that when you have a class like that, you're capturing the full range of variance in that class. So we could inadvertently bias our sample and fail to capture those open grown trees if we don't make sure to gather training data for them. And so that's one of the reasons we're hoping to sample at golf courses, for example, because we're going to try to also make sure, in addition to canopy trees, we're also getting those open grown trees.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then one thing I just got into the website that Tony was telling us about, and I went into the street trees, and we're only getting just genus for that. And I'm wondering if when you pulled up your slide that had, you know, the abbreviation going on of the species that that included more detailed information, are you all getting? It would be awesome if we could get our street tree data to have to get the full Latin name, because again, this relates to our ADU discussion coming up, I think, in terms of taking trees down. I am a total tree hugger. I'm not a tree hugger of certain invasive species, and I would be perfectly happy to put an ADU in the middle of a Norway maple. That's me personally. And so like, it would be great to know whether somebody has a Norway maple in their yard or a sugar maple, which I would feel really differently about. So I don't know if that level of information you feel like is really achievable based on what you're describing here.
Tiffany, we have that, right? It's
yeah. Shannon, when you click on the tree, it says genus and DBH, but above that there's a line. And it says common name maple sugar or
Got
whatever.
it.
So
Okay.
it is there.
So I just have to look a little deeper.
It's in the bubble that pops up. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. Great. All righty. That's it for me. Thank you. I'm excited to see your work.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Then John, and then Rita.
Kudos from my side as well. I have 3 questions. I'm wondering, if you are building on training and data sets that have already previously been done, and if you plan on collaborating with maybe other universities and municipalities to share what you're doing. Secondly, I'm wondering if there's any limitation in the number of tree types that you can identify. And third, I'm wondering, are you able to identify understory trees? A lot of our invasives here are basically, shorter trees and understories. And I'm wondering if they're going to show up on the kind of LiDAR imaging and sensing that's that you're using as a base for this. Thanks very much.
So as far as the understory trees go, unfortunately, anything that's overtopped by a canopy, we won't be able to pick up because we're using that aerial imagery, and it's just not going to show up consistently enough to be accurately classified. We are, however, making sure to take samples when invasive shrubs do show up in a canopy of their own where they're not overtopped. We're making sure to take sample points in those areas so that we have some training data to identify those. And hopefully that can at least provide a sort of clue as far as what areas are most threatened and so forth. And then, sorry, could you remind me your
So I was wondering also if there's any limit to the number of tree species that you can identify, and the other is, are you building on work done elsewhere in terms of training and data sets, and if you are also maybe planning on sharing what you're doing so that other municipalities and universities can use what you've done and expand on this geographically or whatever.
So as far as the limit to the number of tree species, it's sort of yes and no, because in principle, no. But the key is that to accurately classify a tree, we're going to be needing to gather enough training data to really capture the range of possible variables that are encompassed by that tree. And so looking at some similar studies that have been done and in our literature review and everything, I know there was one done for Detroit by our advisor, and I think it took the 20 most common trees and then classified everything else into other. And so it's really going to depend on what our training data looks like at the end of the summer, both from the street tree inventory and also from what we gather. So I can't really answer any more specifically than that, but it really just depends. Are we getting enough information to really feel good about classifying those trees? And then as far as collaborating and so forth, no, but we are trying to make sure that this process, especially as we process the data that we've gathered and everything, we're trying to do it using open source software so that this is easily reproducible by other interested parties.
Okay, Rita?
I'm also excited by this information and look forward to seeing the result. But I want to also call out, and as much as I love trees, I want to call out the really interesting thing that we'll get in terms of the turf grass measurements, because we've been talking as an environmental commission and in terms of encouraging use of less turf grass in the city as a way of addressing some of the just a lot of different issues for climate change, reducing greenhouse gases from extra mowing and many, many things. So I just want to say I appreciate that the work will include that kind of information that will help us see if we are effective in encouraging people and businesses and institutions to reduce their mowed areas. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Rita. Are there any other questions? It looks like Chris has his hand up.
Well, I think, Tony, you're still on the line, and I want to make sure that these students know that you've got some really recent aerial data that is very dense and very high resolution that may be of help to them. And I missed the last meeting. I'm not sure the message got through to them and made the connection, but perhaps you can tell them what you have.
We've got a meeting lined up tomorrow, so it's
yeah. That's what I wanted to say. So first of all, thank you for this effort. This looks amazing, and I know the fact that you're working with both Shannon and Jason, it's going to be a success because you have some wonderful advisors. But I do want to say that, you know, we from the City of IT's GIS program are not like technically on the project, but I feel like we should be. And so I really appreciate the Office of Sustainability for sponsoring this, but don't be strangers with us. And I feel like we should have some check-ins throughout the summer and fall. I just want to put on for the record, I also work part-time as an adjunct lecturer over in the urban planning program at Taubman College in data science as well. So I'm here for you as a resource also. And we're going to meet tomorrow and talk about some of the data we have. If you don't put all the inputs into your model, you'll never know what your model could generate. So let's exhaust every possible option throughout this to make it as successful as possible. That's all. And you guys are going to have fun. And I'm jealous I don't get to go run around the trees all summer. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
So all four of you, I really appreciate you, and I'm so happy that you joined with us to do this. Thank you a bunch.
Yep. Thanks, Chris, for setting this in motion. So, yeah, I just have one question, and that is, I assume you're using like a neural net kind of analysis package, and that you and so you have LiDAR data. Now, the question I have is, of course, the canopy is evolving during the whole annual cycle. So, I mean, the basic data input, are you taking it from a particular, just a particular short part of the year, or are you considering taking data from the spring, summer, and autumn, and using that as part of the inputs?
We're definitely going to be taking data from different times of year, because again, it's one way to capture that full variance and also capture the differences between species. And again, the more ways we can get the algorithm to suss out those subtle differences in between species of trees, the better chance we have of getting a really accurate classification. So we have, I don't remember offhand what we have, but I know we have some leaf off data sets. And I think we have some from springtime as well. And so we'll definitely be including that as another way of getting at those variances.
Okay.
Hopefully there's a good mid-October set, because that's when the native forest fragments show up. That's when you see the city's oak trees.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if there are no other questions, I think we will close out, and thank you again, UC's team, for updating us on your work, on your project, and congratulations. It's wonderful.
Good job.
Yes.
Right, Thomas, you're going to need to make Rita, or actually, it looks like Galen's back. Galen, you want to be host again? Make Galen host.
So
right,
next month,
where do I go to do that?
Next month, continuing natural features things, we'll have Dave Borneman, who will talk about the city's natural areas and really get deep into what native forest fragments are and when they're natural areas and why they're important and how they can guide us toward a more sustainable city landscape. Maybe we'll also be ready to present an early version of amendments to the UDC about better protecting trees in the city. We'll see. We've been working on it several months, as you know, and we're getting closer.
Okay. Well, thanks, Chris. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our April 22nd meeting. I hope you all have had a chance to look at them. Kathy, you have your hand up.
I was just moving to approve.
Is there a second? Chris seconds. All who approve, say aye. Or raise your hands.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, any abstentions? All right, the minutes are accepted unanimously. Let's see, so the next item here is under new business. We have a resolution for the Gelman monitoring plan. And so Rita, do you want to lead this discussion?
Sure, I'll kick it off, and I believe that Councilmember Griswold may want to say some things as well. I really actually consider this to be somewhat a continuation of work we've done earlier this year. So I just want to say that this is about the Allen Creek Drain Monitoring Plan that we addressed in January. And we're really fortunate, I think, to have knowledgeable and persistent members in the community who followed up on the Gelman plume for years. And Bicknell specifically is one who identified the 1,4-dioxane presence in the 1980s. And he then proceeded on a career working in the EPA. Excuse me, somebody should probably mute. I'm hearing a lot of background. He went to work for the EPA, worked on Superfunds, and he returned to Ann Arbor in the last few years, and he's continued to apply his expertise on the Superfund cleanup actions to support our community, where he identified the plume in the first place. So this commission unanimously in January commended Mr. Bicknell for his long-standing dedication to assure the cleanup of the serious industrial pollutant of 1,4-dioxane. And in January, we unanimously voted to advise City Council to support Washtenaw County Water Resources Commissioner Evan Pratt in his effort to issue a notice of violation to Gelman Company about infiltration of 1,4-dioxane in the Allen Creek drain. It is a municipal separate storm sewer system called an MS4. That notice of violation was completed. Gelman responded with a plan that we saw just recently that was distributed to us by Mr. Bicknell, along with some of his comments that drew my attention and that of Councilmember Griswold to this issue. And so we thought that it was worthy of bringing to our group again to discuss and continue that discussion and to consider a resolution that we've put together. We're asking for multiple things: for council to reject the plan as presented, and EGLE, the Michigan Environment and Great Lakes and Energy Department. We're asking the Water Resources Commission and council and other local governments to suggest revisions to the monitoring plan, adding some sampling and monitoring wells, and that those entities involved require Gelman to revise its objective and criterion for abatement. That is, those are the basic things that I wrote up as resolved in our document. So with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Griswold and ask if you have any comments that you'd like to make.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Rita. That covers most of it. And I just want to mention that I did talk to the Washtenaw County Chair, Sue Shink, today, and she thanked me for this resolution. And she also said that the statutory drain board had authorized Evan Pratt to get quotes to monitor it. And Evan may be able to share more information about that. But it's probably going to take all of the community to continue to put pressure on Gelman to actually clean up and address this dioxane contamination to acceptable standards. And Evan is here, so I don't want to speak for him. If he wants to say something, that would be great.
Through the chair, yes. Okay. Yeah, so we have seen the proposed work plan from Gelman's consultant. I have spoken with EGLE, Michigan Department of Energy, Great Lakes, and other things, and environment, right? So there are a couple of three areas where, first off, we do not feel that their work plan is complete, for starters. Secondly, as you all may be aware, many of the folks at EGLE who would be providing comment on this said they were sorry that they were spending a lot of time preparing for the court case, which in my opinion went pretty well at the beginning of May. So I believe that was time well spent, but that did cost us on this. So I'm awaiting a letter from them. I'm not an expert in these work plans and in environmental sampling, remediation, and every single aspect of the statutes out there. But I'm waiting for a response from Eagle. I have agreed to be the issuer of the cover letter that says, here are the things we expect from you. And many of those things will be from Eagle. But in summary, I feel that we do need to get some groundwater samples. I agree with anyone who has said, and I think it's pretty easy to say, that whatever was sampled in the water that is in the pipe, we sampled that in dry weather and there was flowing water. So that means there's groundwater getting in there. And we know from the prior sampling regimes that there is also uncontaminated groundwater in there. So I agree with anyone who says, hey, surely the groundwater in some places must be more contaminated than the readings we're getting in pipe, right? The in-pipe water is diluted, in short. So I feel like it's really important to get a good handle on what level that contaminated groundwater is at. I think there is some debate and confusion, including in my own brain, on what is the threshold requirement. And that is one of the things that I've specifically asked Eagle to please make absolutely clear to me, and as well as Gelman, what their position is. I have spoken to the Assistant Attorney General and the county's legal counsel that's a pretty important thing, and I think they agree that's a pretty important thing to pin down. I don't know what they're going to say, if it's this 280 groundwater surface interface, or if it is the 29 for the vapor intrusion. But regardless, I'm looking for that specific direction from those folks. And at the end of the day, the reason for sampling in the groundwater is to be able to know exactly the groundwater right by the pipe, exactly what is getting in there. So it's a pretty narrow piece of the legal construct that this MS4 operates within. It might be of interest for people to know, because I know it's very challenging to read every single one of those briefs from every single expert in the court case, particularly when the judge seemed to have made up his mind fairly quickly without having to have those presented in the case. So those of us who just viewed the court case didn't get to see it. But the point is, Dr. Larry Lemke proposed a pretty extensive groundwater sampling routine as part of the legal action. So I just want to make sure this group understands that that's already in court. That's something that's already been requested in court. That is not in the amended consent judgment that the judge ordered up, but that certainly is in the pleadings that's already ongoing, that we need more information. At this time, what I've been authorized by the county's statutory drain board, which governs decisions about expenditures on most of the county drains within the city, is to take 2 samples. I believe it's very evident from research that I've done and folks that I've talked to that the highest concentrations of groundwater immediately adjacent to this Allen Creek pipe are probably in the vicinity of the Hannah Nature area, which is behind the Salvation Army off of Huron, if you're familiar with that area, right? The Urbana, Huron, Marcana vicinity. So we've got a specific location out there where I'm interested in seeing that information. However, what I've been authorized to do is to take the quotes. One of the particular issues in the work plan, which others have pointed out, is they're not proposing to sample the groundwater yet, and they haven't really described well, when will they make the decision whether or not to sample it. What they are doing is a pretty extensive amount of research on what's actually in the pipe, and their position is that will help them determine the best locations to sample the groundwater. And my feeling is, much as the city has done with some of the monitoring wells that they have already determined are necessary to be sentinels for Barton Pond, that they know where they want to do them. Brian Stiglitz at the plant has worked with a consultant to do those. And if the city has to just pay out of pocket to do those because Gelman can't get there fast enough, they'll just go ahead and do that. So I'm following that lead and saying, I think we have a pretty good idea where the concentrations would be the worst in the groundwater. And that would really help us understand if we're, on a precipice here, or if they do, where do we stand, I guess, from a pursuing it any further standpoint. At the end of the day, I believe Eagle is also looking for to provide me clarity on their expectations regarding, there's usually a corrective action plan. So the way this MS4 thing works is sometimes the immediate action is required, but more normally there is a reasonable time frame, sometimes a 5-year time frame for providing some type of corrective action. And just a reminder to this group, and that'll be my last detail, and I'll take a pause for you guys to talk a little further. I mainly came to listen. I'd like to make sure that I understand what Eagle's position is on that corrective action plan, because ultimately my office is a permit holder through them. My personal feeling is I'm not sure my office has done anything wrong where we should be cited or be responsible for an issue that I thought Eagle was in charge of. But nonetheless, I'd like to help, right? We all want this to go away. It's not going to go away soon, but we need to take each little bite of that elephant as we can. So the point is, I wanted to have quotes available in case Gelman is reluctant to move a little more quickly with at least getting some amount of groundwater sampling. And if they don't get there in time, we'll go ahead and proceed through the statutory drain board and move forward with this. I would certainly like to have some understanding of what's in the groundwater in that area as we get towards the end of summer, early fall, at the latest.
Okay. Evan, I have a question.
Sure.
And that is there going to be a public hearing on this? Is that part of the normal process that Eagle will schedule a public hearing?
I'm not aware of any public hearing. I'm not aware that a public hearing would typically be part of the public process as far as review of a work plan. And this is not, I guess, the typical work plan that they just review internally and make a final decision on. They're going to provide their written comments to my office, and they're looking to my office to push that out. Much like with the PFAS and the Tri-Bar thing up in Wixom, it was actually the community that had to pursue the enforcement of that situation, although Eagle provided some support.
Okay. And only one more question, which government entities have legal standing here, do you think?
I am no attorney on this one, and as I said, I'm feeling like there's something that's already in court that's related to this as far as the sampling piece, maybe not make the MS4 go away, but I feel like there is some legal standing for the county. As I've mentioned before and other times, and you all may have seen, the county drain office, county drain law in Michigan is special assessment law. So I want to be sensitive to the notion that any money that's expended on investigating or any further action beyond investigation really is the city's money. So I've certainly alerted the city administrator and some of the staff that, hey, we've taken some quotes, and if we're not going to see Gelman at least getting a better understanding for us on the groundwater in a reasonable amount of time, why don't we just go ahead and do that ourselves? We have the right to do that. There's nobody can prevent us from doing that. I have an easement.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, you wanted to comment on those questions. Dan Bicknell.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Evan for his comments, and I think we're pretty close here if we do get some groundwater monitoring wells in. But the basic question that we have is what is going to be the criteria for remediation? And in the Washtenaw County MS4 permit, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System permit, which Evan holds, Evan is actually the authority, the enforcement authority on that. And if we could look at that permit says that an illicit discharge is anything above uncontaminated groundwater going into the storm drain. And what's happening is Gelman is trying to say, well, that's the definition of an illicit discharge, illegal discharge, but we want to apply water quality criteria, like a groundwater surface water interface criteria, which is generally it's about 280 parts per billion dioxane. So they're trying to turn this work plan to their advantage by using a criteria that's much, much less restrictive than background. And as Evan indicates, the requirement is that Gelman cannot have anything above background going into the pipe. But yet in their monitoring plan, they want to monitor the stormwater and compare that to water quality criteria. So they're doing a couple of, I call it incorrect approaches to attaining proper compliance. And that's why I think Evan is totally correct that we have to, and Gelman has to understand what is along that Allen Creek drain as well on the shallow groundwater side, because that's what's moving in. And if the work shows that in the stormwater, this is the area of the Allen Creek drain that's being impacted by infiltration, then their next step should be that's where they should put these shallow groundwater monitoring wells. And that's why when GEA reviewed it, our comment was, you need to have them committed, please, to this step. They are not committed to groundwater monitoring wells, and they're not committed to the illicit discharge being background. So I would be very hesitant to approve a monitoring plan for Gelman that didn't include the follow-up from the stormwater sampling to include the monitoring wells in the appropriate locations, as well as the requirement in the permit that background is what they need to attain. If you approve a flawed monitoring program, then that's just going to give Gelman traction to fight and fight and fight. So I would support what Evan is saying. Let's get everyone's input. Let Evan rightfully issue the letter back to Gelman on comments on the monitoring plan and have that monitoring plan updated appropriately.
Okay. All right.
And I fully support what Kathy and Rita have proposed here in your resolution. I think that resolution is a very concise statement of what needs to be done. So I would fully support the language in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So I'll open up the floor to questions. Kathy Griswold has her hand up, and then Lisa Dish.
Okay, I want to thank Evan and Dan for coming here tonight. And for Evan, I saw this as what can we do as members of the community and members of political groups to help you in your negotiations with Gelman, given that in recent history, Eagle has either not had the time, as you said, or has not been as assertive as local community members would like. So I see this resolution as a living document. We're not planning to approve it this evening, and I would be open to any edits that you suggest. And I did talk to our city attorney, Stephen Postema, today, looped in Tom Crawford, and also sent an email to Brian Steglitz. So I know within the city, there are many different staff members that are involved, as well as the lawyers, and we were at the hearing this morning. So I guess to summarize, what can we do to help you?
I appreciate the invite to the meeting and keeping us in the loop. I think as long as we stay unified and marching in the same direction, we have the best chance. You know, that's been proven to be successful. It proved to be successful in early May. So I don't have any specific requests or what have you. I guess we'll see what, I presume that the Attorney General is going to provide some input to what Eagle shares with me, because at the end of the day, I know they may not, I'm looking for them to be very clear on what is the threshold that we're looking at, and then let's move forward with what the threshold is. We may not like that. We may not agree with that. We may see something that, you know, city may pursue and say, well, we'd like to see some legal action. How do we move that forward? But again, I think it's already in court here. And again, the the crossover between an ongoing site remediation and this MS4 thing sounds like gray water to me. I'm having a hard time pinning down, well, exactly what are we stating? I like to state the expectations, give people a chance to perform, and if they don't perform, then either I didn't do a good job of stating the expectations or they didn't do a good job of doing what they're supposed to do. So I think right now what you're doing is very helpful.
Oh, okay, thank you. And as an elected official, I try to communicate with the county elected officials, Jason Morgan and Sue Schenk. But I guess I would say, feel free to reach out to me if there's a misstep or anything else that I can do, again, to assist you. So thank you. And I think Dan had his hand up.
Yeah, I would just clarify that the consent judgment relates to Michigan Part 201 remediation. And what we're dealing with here is a federal delegated permit, the MS4 permit. So it's really two different enforcement actions that are occurring. One is being run by Eagle as part of Part 201 in the consent judgment negotiations. And one is being run by the Water Resources Commissioner because of because of the violation of the MS4 permit. So two regulatorily different programs, two different areas. So there's not really overlap between them. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, do you have any more questions, Kathy?
No, thank you. But now I know why I'm a bit confused. It's more than just gray area, Evan.
Yeah. Bless you guys for being here. Lisa, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So I really appreciate the effort that's going into this resolution and the attention that people are bringing to the monitoring plan, because it's obviously a crucial piece of the whole picture on Gelman. So again, I'm always very grateful for the amount of work that there is here. So given what Commissioner Pratt just said, I'm not sure if I get your title. I should call you by your title. But anyway, what it is exactly. But anyway, I'm a little confused by some of the language in the resolution, because what I understand from the remarks that you made, Mr. Pratt, you are saying that you do not, it is not, Eagle has not made clear what the threshold requirement is, nor is it clear what Gelman thinks it is. The language of the resolution, however, in the final resolved clause says that Gelman introduces incorrect regulatory criteria, it should be, in multiple sections of the monitoring plan. And then the first resolve clause refers in its last line to illegal abatement criteria. It should be, I think, or, the illegal abatement criterion. Yes, that's right there. And then, yeah, okay. That is okay. And then the last resolved clause says that Eagle, the WRC, and the local government should require that Gelman revise its monitoring plan objective and criterion for abatement action to be consistent with federal and state environmental laws and regulations. I suppose that one can stand because it's not making a judgment as to whether the criteria and criterion is correct or not. But I think the other two parts where I read, I'm concerned about the language that calls it incorrect and illegal, because you have stated that it's not clear from Eagle. And if you feel like you need clarification from Eagle, I don't understand what is the basis in empirical fact that would allow us to assert in this resolution that it is incorrect and illegal.
Yeah, I did not have a chance to read closely, but I did read it once. And my quick take was, I really like that last resolved clause. Just like you said, we want them to be consistent with the law. That is the conversation I had with my legal counsel and the Attorney General. We want them to be consistent with the law. And since you asked, because I was not going to offer unsolicited advice on those other parts, because I don't know what popped into my head, and it sounds like Kathy has already started those wheels moving, is you might have your legal counsel take a look at those phrases that are referencing what's legal or not legal, just to determine, you can still assert something, right? And you may or may not win in court, but does it create difficulty if this has to be pursued as a legal matter? I don't know. I don't know that a resolution necessarily creates difficulty there, but that is the only thing I saw, was maybe you want to have legal counsel review that to determine if that would bind you up at all. Because at the end of the day, it's sort of superfluous to that final be it resolved, right? They have to obey the law. And I'm really eager to get a clearer interpretation on whether it is, as Mr. McNell says, anything above background, or if it is one of these other thresholds that Eagle has. And again, the reason they're intertwined is because you've got an active remediation site that has crossed over into an MS4 system. So they got peanut butter in my chocolate, is what I say.
But that's delicious, and this is not. Yeah, I think it's great that I wouldn't be prepared to vote on anything tonight without advice from our legal staff. And I understand from Councilmember Griswold that we're not going to vote on anything tonight. But I think that it's more, I think that if we pass a resolution such as this, we should be asking for what we need. And if what we need is clarification, then we should be asking for that. And we certainly want consistency with federal and state environmental laws and regulations. So I'm okay with asking for that. But I don't think that we should have incorrect statements in a resolution, regardless. It doesn't matter if it puts us in legal trouble or not. I just think that what we ask people to do should be based on fact. And so we need to just make sure that if the facts are not clear, we are asking for clarifications of the facts. And certainly we wouldn't vote to approve a monitoring plan where the criteria are not clear. So I think the idea of holding off on voting on this monitoring plan until it is consistent with criteria that are clear makes total sense to me. I just don't want to muddy the waters by putting accusations in a resolution.
Thanks, Lisa. Dan Bignell has his hand up.
Yes, council member. I had a chance to actually, as GEA, provide a number of comments on the monitoring plan. And I sent it to City Council, Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners, Scioto Township, Ann Arbor Township, you all in the Environmental Commission. And if you take a look at that document, it helps understand what is really required by the federal and state laws and regulations. So just as background, you might want to take a look at that to help understand why there is this discrepancy between is background required or is a water quality criteria required in this case. And I thank Kathy Griswold for getting city attorneys to look at this as well.
Okay. Kathy, you had your hand up. Kathy Griswold, and then John Mursky.
Just for clarification, yes, the legal staff is looking at this. And is the point of concern right now the first resolve clause with the statement illegal abatement criteria? I just want to point out to our legal staff what
that one. It's also the last whereas clause introduces incorrect regulatory. It either should be an incorrect regulatory criterion or incorrect regulatory criteria. The word incorrect. If Mr. Pratt is not clear on what's legal and what's correct, I don't think our resolution should be affirming, asserting things like that. That's where I am. Thanks for asking.
Okay. And I would agree to that and appreciate that Evan was here to give feedback today.
Are you done, Kathy? Okay. John, you have the floor. John Mursky.
Thank you. I had read the resolution before the meeting. I don't have it in front of me right now. There's one minor concern that I have with it. By memory, it's, I think, the last resolved clause where there's 2 points. And I think it calls out for permanent monitoring. And I can't imagine that we're asking for permanent monitoring. It seems to me, should be some threshold, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, I don't know, but not permanent. So I would just point that out and leave that to the experts to determine what that is. I see Dan has his hand up.
And that's the second to last resolved clause.
Second to last.
Yeah, John. In this business, there are temporary monitoring wells and permanent monitoring wells, and you can sample the permanent monitoring wells on whatever basis you want. And so what this says is that if you're going to put in monitoring wells, I want those monitoring wells to be there. So if I want to take samples in the future, I can take samples in the future. It doesn't mandate that throughout time they have to collect the samples. And what happened to us is Eagle put in these temporary borings a couple years ago. And because they put in the temporary borings, you can't go back and collect groundwater samples. It's a common tactic that's used by some nefarious people in the business. And so if you put in the permanent monitoring wells, then you can always go back, whether it's the city or Gelman or whomever. So it doesn't mean a time commitment. It just means that you're going to put in a well that can live on for a number of years.
Okay, so it's a designation of a type of installation. Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Any more questions? I don't see any hands up. Oh, Kathy has her hand up.
Oh, I just want to say thank you to Rita Mitchell for all the work that she did on this, and thanks to everyone who has provided recommendations and revisions. So as I said, it's a working document, and we will continue to refine it.
No, here. Thank you very much, Rita. Oh, Rita, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you also to Evan Pratt for appearing on short notice and for providing a lot of good information, and also to Dan Bicknell. Thank you.
Yeah. So my sense is that the action is that Kathy and Rita are going to continue working on this resolution.
Would we like to make a formal statement of that in some way? Is that needed?
I don't think so.
I'm just asking. Okay.
My plan was to bring it forward with any revisions that are received in the next few days and put it on the agenda for the June 7th council meeting for discussion purposes only, letting them know that the Environmental Commission is continuing to work on it, and at a future date it'll come from the Environmental Commission, you know, with our recommendation or not, back to council. And that provides some transparency and keeps all the different groups informed. And also we would be communicating with the county commissioners that this is happening. Does that seem reasonable, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Now, we can always call a special meeting if it's required before our next official meeting. So just let me know. Just let me know. Either Rita or Kathy, just let me know about that, and I could try scheduling a special meeting.
Oh, thanks. And we will do that on short notice if Evan Pratt requests.
Okay. All right. And so thank you very much, Rita and Kathy, for bringing this forward at this time. It is a complicated matter, and it's going to require some tweaking here, but hopefully that can be done quickly. Okay, and just let me know if there's anything I can do to help facilitate this going forward. Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, everybody, and thank you again, Evan and Dan, for being here.
Yeah, it's great to see the rest of the commission members. There's a few people I haven't seen before from past trips here, so I appreciate the invite, appreciate the interest. Always good to like Judge Connor said, it's great to hear what the community's got to say, right?
Hey, we're the voters. Okay. Thanks, everybody. So shall we move on to the next item on the agenda? Oh, Dan has, bye, Dan. Are you saying goodbye or did you have a comment? No, I guess he's saying goodbye. Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Evan. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which was a resolution that was drafted by Rita Mitchell about ADUs and natural features. Rita, do you want to
Yeah, I'll do
manage the
kick
discussion?
off again. Let me get my place here. Okay. ADUs are accessory dwelling units. They are currently allowed by certain aspects of city ordinance. And my reason for bringing this issue to the Environmental Commission was particularly to talk about trees and stormwater. And I think it was particularly helpful that we had some discussion about trees tonight and our expectations for future understanding of what's going on in the city. Planning Commission has revised some ordinances regulating the ADUs, and that may result in ADUs being allowed in all residential areas, as far as I understand them, except for mobile home parks. They've had 2 public hearings, and this meeting is just another opportunity to add this element of talking about trees and natural features. I'm going to hope that Commissioner Gibrando and Councilmember Dish can fill in some gaps that may be there for my side. But for background, I was one of members of the community who worked on the Urban Forestry Management Plan in 2014. And I just pulled some information from that plan that was referenced earlier tonight, based on a flyover of the city that was, I believe, in 2012. The report was written in 2014. And it said that private property holds about 75% of the trees in the city, which I thought was pretty interesting. And that the remaining, about 25% are on public property. So it's important to look at private property when we think about trees. And the ADU kind of thing has, as one of our callers tonight mentioned, the potential to affect trees that are on lot lines in the center of any backyard or front yard. And so it's just something that I feel like I've learned from Chris Graham over time, the concern with development and how it can compact roots of trees, not only on an immediate property that's a project for construction, but also on an adjacent property if the roots of the trees travel underground and we just don't see them. And so that's a concern. So if we are to meet some goals, and one of the goals of the 2014 plan was to increase canopy in certain areas of the city, and one of them was to increase the private land from 37% of the private land from 37% to 67% tree canopy. If that may not be our immediate goal right now. Things, we're now in 2021. But I think we do need to look at trees overall for the long term and make sure that really, I think we want to increase our trees. And I'm worried that we're taking down a lot of trees for various, sometimes good reasons, maybe sometimes not so good. And so it's just something to consider as we move forward. And so I appreciate this opportunity to discuss with you all as people who are really concerned with the environment. And so here I am. I put out a resolution to suggest that we have this discussion and to get your comments and feedback and see what we may consider doing, and whether you agree with some of the suggestions that I had in that resolution.
Sorry, Shannon, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So Rita and I talked, was it yesterday, the day before? And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of my response to this as well, and also response to the caller that came into in my mind. There's two big things going on. One, the stormwater, I feel like, is a complete non-issue because we already have a regulation that covers that. If you build anything more than 200 square feet of impervious area on your property, you have to manage for the 1-inch storm. That's whether it's a shed, whether it's more driveway, whether it's new sidewalk, whether it's in addition to your house. Nobody is going to build an ADU that is under 200 square feet. I can tell you that you can't, you can barely fit a bedroom in that. So the stormwater piece, in my mind, is a non-issue because we already have that covered. So that, I feel like, is clean and done and not an issue. And we have an excellent system. And as somebody who's worked in multiple communities around this, let me tell you, we have a really good system for that compared to some other communities. So the bigger question, I think, is the tree question. And just also, Rita, you would characterize it as front yard trees. It's really not going to be front yard trees. It's only going to be side and back because you can't put it in the front setback. So it's not going to have anything to do with your street trees. It's not going to have anything to, I mean, unless you just have like some massive, tree up in the front. So the tree issue is a stickier wicket, I think, with this. And one of the things that Rita and I talked about that I feel like the city tends to get involved when you're at the permit level, which is towards the end of your design process. And at that point, it's really hard to unwind things. And so I guess what I was really excited to see some of the tools that Tony was talking about and some of the things that students were talking about, in that I feel like we need to be able to create some sort of very reachable system for people to be able to understand the resources that they do have on their site, and that there may be ways to kind of work around them at the really early level of design. And so if people can see, with the viewer, where their property lines are, where there may be trees and not, if we could get down to the level of knowing what kinds of trees they are, that's like fantastic, because then you don't need an arborist involved and things like that. And I would love it if we could create some sort of kind of basic site analysis piece for people that would allow them to say, oh, maybe here versus there, so that they could incentivize them to make good choices around this. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of trees I can't stand too. And I would be happy to take down some of these invasive things. I truly would. And I actually feel like it's better to take them down sometimes because of the havoc that they are wrecking on our woods. And so it's not, again, this is my own personal opinion. I don't feel like they're all equal opportunity. I don't feel like every tree is worth the same. And so if we can get some of that more granular information on that, that allows people to be able to say, well, maybe it's not such a big deal, over here. The other thing I would just like to be able to kind of set the context around is that, ADUs serve a lot of purposes, but one of the things that we are trying to get at with this, and it is not a panacea, and it's going to take so many different ways of getting at this issue, but one of the issues we're trying to address with this is being able to address some level of affordability in the city. And it doesn't mean building these is going to be cheap or anything like that, but it does start to be able to allow us to have more density in the city in ways that are outside of our ability right now. And so that is one of the goals. And so this is a balancing act of trying to figure out how to balance all of these goals together. So I think it would be kind of sad if nobody could build an ADU if it meant taking down, a 1-inch tree or something like that, because I think that, we need to figure out how to balance those things together. So it would take, I don't know what it would take to kind of put something like that together. And again, I know staff don't have bandwidth for that kind of thing, but I would love to see some sort of way for people to be able to come up with their own kind of early study of where to put the thing and how to think about it, so that people can make good choices around planning for these things. So that's my 2 cents as it is. Lisa, I don't know if you have other things to add in terms of our discussions on Planning Commission. We did have 2 public sessions. A lot of people participated. So it was sort of characterized that we didn't have any public comment, and that's really not true. I think that you can always do more, but there were a lot of people participating. Those were long meetings. I think that was a little bit mischaracterized in terms of, planning just turn them down. That's not what it felt like when we were staying up till midnight listening people talk about this. So.
Okay. All right. Chris had his hand up, and then Lisa, and then Bob. Chris Graham.
Well, perhaps Shannon, the proposed code could include a requirement of early analysis process. In other words, some sort of, I don't know whether it would be a city employee that would go out, or you'd hire a private person to come and do a natural features assessment. In the UDC, you're down to the regulatory building permit level already, and short of having you can't cut a tree without a permit kind of rule where on single family property where we haven't gotten yet, and probably we'll find that hard to do. Getting that early information is really the secret to persuading people not to take down heritage trees, never mind Norway's. Secondly, stormwater is not completely a free deal because you've got to pipe the water or run the water somewhere. And that could be through the root zone of a big heritage tree. So it's not exactly that stormwater controls are not an issue. Again, some sort of an early study about where you would put drain tiles for a new roof without damaging trees, important trees, would be very helpful to people.
That's reviewed by the city, though, just so you know, like that you have to turn in a permit, you have to turn in a map, you have to turn in things like that where
right,
they
but I'm
evaluate
not persuaded that the way contractors do things are produce no damage to tree roots. Maybe we're getting on top of that now, but I'm not fully persuaded that we are. Perhaps you know, Shannon, but the one house I was involved in, we collected all the roof water from the whole house and put it into tanks underground and used it to irrigate with before we switched to city water. But they wanted to go right through the root zone of a 130-year-old oak. And I said, stop. Hold on. Not that direction and not there. And of course, the heart was in the right place for this client to collect their roof water, but to lose the tree would have been worse in terms of the public service benefit over time. So I really like your idea of some sort of a requirement in the new language that gets at this early planning, early analysis process, so people can be informed.
Are you done, Chris?
Oh yeah, thanks. Hands down.
Lisa, you have the floor. And then Bob.
Yeah, just also by way of some context, I think the likelihood of massive, of there being a run to go and construct ADUs has really, really, really been exaggerated.
Yeah.
And I want to point out that the original ADU ordinance legalized ADUs to be built on a little bit over 15,000 properties. this amended ordinance will add just under 7,000 to that, bringing the total to about 21,000. So it's a 1/3 increase in what's currently eligible. And that increase came from the fact that Planning Commission removed the minimum lot requirement and also removed the requirement that in order to that you needed to already have an accessory structure on your property by December 31st, 2016. So there were 2 obstacles removed, which resulted in just a 30% increase in the number of properties that are eligible. Since that first ordinance was passed in 2016, something in the range of like 22 to 24 people have requested permits for ADUs. We do not know how many people have actually constructed them, but that is a tiny, tiny percentage. And if these regulatory barriers that Planning Commission has lifted result in growth of ADUs proportional to the cities in the country where they are most established and most popular, which are Seattle and Portland, we would likely see 1% ADUs built over the next 5 to 10 years. So that would be 280. So I don't want to minimize the concern about trees. I think that is an important concern. And if there are ways we can build into the permit approval and site development process, I think we should really do that, absolutely no question. But I think that many of the arguments that we've heard and also the claim that there needed to be more public participation was based on the notion that this was a change that was going to affect 21,000 households. And that is simply catastrophizing. It is not warranted by any experience of any other municipality. And particularly now when construction costs have skyrocketed, there are so many financial disincentives to building ADUs. First among them, the fact that when you put an ADU on your property, you do not get 100% return on that ADU, which is to say that it does not increase your property value by what it costs you. So this is not something that people looking to make money off investments are going to do. That's not going to drive an expansion of this. These things are typically driven by a desire to house a relative, a close or extended family relative, or by some other goal that somebody has. But like I say, we're talking 22 in the last 5 years. So I am all for our considering the impact that this has on trees, but I think that we don't want to hold up this amendment that has been worked on for a really long time and that serves a number of really legitimate, widely held goals that have to do with smart growth rather than sprawl. I don't think we want to hold it up for these considerations.
Okay, Lisa, thank you. Bob, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with the points that Councilmember Dish and Commissioner Gibrandal made, and just to add a couple more small points onto that. I too agree with the goal of preserving trees, but I'm not convinced that increasing the required setbacks for ADUs accomplishes that. I don't see the link between the two. And I think really what it would do is just reduce the number of properties where they can be built. And to me, that's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. I think that if a homeowner is going to build an ADU, and if they have a tree in the way and they want that tree there, if they go ahead and build the ADU, they'll replace that tree. The resolution makes note that the A20 plan talks about incentivizing planting of additional trees, and maybe there's a way that we could incentivize any trees lost to ADU construction to be replaced at a 2-to-1 to increase the canopy. I don't know how that would work, but it might be an option. I just also in the A20 plan, increasing housing diversity is a specific goal, and it specifically calls out ADUs as one way to do that as part of their strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I think those things can work together. And I guess that's it.
Okay, Bob, thanks. John Mirsky had his hand up, and then Chris Graham.
I generally share Commissioner Needham's sentiments. I'm wondering if there's a different way of addressing this, and instead of just having a change in the setbacks, that there might be a threshold where we say trees above a certain DBH, or that we introduce something with critical root zone area or something like that, as opposed to just changing the setback across the board for every property, whether there's a tree there or not, and saying you can't go within a certain distance of the lot line, and there may be just a row of shrubs in the back of the property. So, you know, why should someone have to adhere to that? I'm not that familiar with exactly what's being proposed, but it seems to me if we really want to protect trees, there may be a different way of doing it other than just changing the setback and increasing it. So I'd encourage us to be creative in doing it that way. And then I'd also point out that Commissioner Graham mentioned we're working on some changes to the UDC that will increase the mitigation for our heritage trees. And the other thing is we're planning on, I think that there was going to be language in terms of protecting critical root zones of trees. So there's some things that we're doing to, or that eventually hopefully will be introduced into the UDC that will address some of those concerns as well. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Chris, you have the floor.
So I agree that setback change doesn't help. Let's say that someone wants to build a UD accessory dwelling unit, ADU, in the backyard, and the backyard of not only that house, but the adjoining houses over a block or so are in an 84th fragment, which means very likely that in the backyard between the houses are landmark and heritage native trees, some of them quite old and elderly. Council members, are you prepared to say no, you can't build that structure if there's not room without taking those trees down? If you're not prepared to say no, then we have a problem. Because there's where the rub comes. And I think I agree with you, Lisa, that this is a small percentage of the small percentage of these projects that will happen. But we're going to run into that somewhere.
Okay, Lisa, you have the floor.
Yes. So, but Commissioner Graham, don't we already have that problem? Because as a private homeowner, I can cut down whatever trees I want in my yard. So the ADU ordinance neither exacerbates nor creates that problem. If we need to protect heritage trees, we need some kind of way to make them a trust that comes with property.
Agreed.
But yeah, so I mean, totally. But then, so that problem is a different problem that ADUs are part of, but it's a pre-existing problem. It doesn't come with the ADUs.
Well,
I could no more say no to that ADU than I could go next door to my neighbor Ed Saunders and say, don't you cut down that tree, because it's his property. But Ed
so is the ADU under the code now, and the amendment by right?
Mhm.
Okay, so in order to solve this problem, we will have to get into, at least in native forest fragments, some kind of prohibition, some kind of permit, some kind of defense of these big trees. Not just for ADUs, but in general.
Right. It would have to be in general because you couldn't single out ADUs for something that a private property owner can otherwise do.
Well, we are in agreement, and step 2 of our work will get the single family housing. We'll see where we come out. It didn't work very well in 1990. We'll see how we do in 2022.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to make a comment? I mean, I'll just say that I'm thinking about this as a rule. It was just I'm walking around my neighborhood. In other neighborhoods, I just don't see how, having just a setback rule and changing it from 3 feet to 15 feet or whatever is going to really help the situation. So I mean, I guess my sentiments are in the direction of what Lisa and Bob and John Mursky have mentioned, and I think there must be some way we can protect larger trees, or at least require that if people are going to cut down small trees, that they replace them somewhere else on their property. And so I think this could be a topic for our next meeting. So I'm hoping that Chris, that we can maybe put this on as an agenda item for our next meeting and discuss what ways we might be able to change the city code to incorporate these positive suggestions, like we've heard from Shannon about starting a natural features review process right at the beginning of the planning of any kind of construction project here in the city, and maybe mandating some smaller equipment sizes or anything, because one of the common things I see, I'm not going to elaborate on this much, but I just see people using equipment that's too big for the site because that's what they have, because it's like all size fits all, and so they'll want to just tear down everything so they can get their big piece of equipment in there, even if it's a Bobcat. So I'm thinking, Chris, maybe we can have this as an agenda item for our next meeting and have a pretty good discussion about it.
Maybe not the next meeting. You really need to see what we're thinking about in the set of amendments we're working on now.
Mm-hmm.
We need to educate a lot more people about what native forest fragments are, where our big heritage trees are, what's important out there. And if we could do one thing as a result of this discussion, is to amend the proposed changes to include some kind of natural features assessment. A great number of people in the city don't understand how important a big native tree actually is.
Mm-hmm.
It's irreplaceable. You can't plant 10 little ones and make up for the loss of one of these guys.
No, I think we all share that sentiment, Chris, and so let's get it done. And whenever you're prepared to discuss it, let's all think about it.
Next time, David Borman's going to talk about native forest fragments and our natural areas, which are composed of them. And we can get in deeply into questions about what these things are across the city. And perhaps what I can do is bring the map Ann Arbor back into my fingers, and I'll show you before and after things in native forest fragments in parts of the city, so you can really see where they are with development under them.
But the key thing is to set rules that attain the goal that you want to without, tripping over everybody.
Well, one way, just to show you, one way we're thinking of doing it is very much tightening the requirement for a grading permit.
Yeah.
And in order to go off paved surfaces on any property, you would need to do an assessment of the natural features there and indicate if there are any landmark heritage trees and indicate what you're going to do to protect them, to keep from compacting soils on that property if you're going off the pavement. And this would apply for anything above the size of a shed.
Yep, that sounds good. Okay, well, let's keep that in the back of our minds. Kathy, you have your hand up, Kathy Griswold.
Yeah, I agree. We need to keep working on this. I think that we need to clearly identify what the value is of some of these larger heritage trees, because if we're trying to balance the benefit of an ADU, the benefit of a building, and then also the benefit of solar panels, we have to have an equation that, are the solar panels more important than this one tree that will have to be cut down? And I don't, I'm troubled by that right now, and we can't make informed decisions if we don't have that information. I'm also wondering if there are any progressive communities that already have tree management programs for private property.
Unfortunately, it's pretty much a taboo.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Country, but we're trying to invent something as we did invent our original natural features protection.
We need a hobbit town. So, okay, so let's see, it's getting late. So Rita, what would you like? Rita, you have your hand up. What would you like to do? Hi, you're muted.
I had unmuted it. Okay. I just want to say thank you all for this conversation, because this is exactly what I think we need in terms of trying to balance out these multiple issues. And I'm glad that Kathy brought up the issue of solar panels, because there are many things. It's not just the ADUs. There are many things that are challenging our trees right now, in addition to aging, in addition to climate change. There are so many things. And I think we do need some way to assess how to protect them as much as we can. And I hope that I really would like us to not just get down to a dollar and cents evaluation of a tree, because I think they are so much more than what I've seen in the tree calculators, that I hope it's just not a dollar value. It never is enough in those tree calculators as far as I can see. And so I think there has to be some kind of a cultural respect that I don't know how to engender, but I think we might be on the cusp of doing that. And I hope that that's the case, that we in Tree Town can really live it out. I'm really worried that we may get 10,000, 20,000 additional trees in private property and street trees, but the net may actually end up being negative in some ways. And that's a real concern that I'd like to avoid. So I appreciate your discussion, the feedback. I don't feel that we have to vote on this tonight, what I brought. I certainly trust Commissioner Gibb Randall and Councilmember Dish to take this kind of feedback to the next level as you work on the ADUs. And I look forward to continuing to work on the trees with all of you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rita, for bringing this up.
Thanks, Rita.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which are reports from committees. How about natural features? Do you have anything additional to add? Chris, you're muted.
No, we'll see you next month. We'll do more for you.
Okay, thanks. Solid waste. I don't have anything to report for C&D. Lisa?
We are losing a very important employee.
Oh, yes. I should say that Eileen Naples is leaving the city. Her husband got a job in Austin, and so she's moving. She's going to be moving there as of almost now, I think, middle of June. She will be working until remotely until she gets a replacement, until they hire a replacement. Yeah. So Lisa, do you have anything you want to say about zero waste?
Oh, through my tears. Okay, so yeah, we're doing a lot. John Callowart and I are working on a grant for next cycle, possibly 2 grants for next cycle, that will develop, not just develop, well, develop metrics that can actually be used with the information we can actually get from people who participate in the reuse, refurbishment, recycling economy. There's a second larger set of grants that helps us actually further develop that network, and we're looking at that as well. The group that was tentatively working on reusable food containers, did I mention this to you before? I feel like I did, yeah. So that is actually happening now next week. We begin a 1-month pilot of reusable food containers at Miss Kim's, at El Harissa, at Zingerman's, and at the Detroit Street filling station. And we have a sophisticated set of labeling and QR codes that will enable us to gather data to see how the containers circulate. And we have an incentive program to try to get people to not stall them in their homes, but actually take them out to one of these 4 restaurants. Then we have a policy committee working on a set of goals that will help to align the work that we do within the parameters of the solid waste resource management program with zero waste goals. We are depending on Steve to make a lot of progress with C&D, because that's part of what we need in order to increase our commercial diversion rates. And then the sustainability ambassadors are working on extending compost to multifamily homes that don't have curbside compost and can't get curbside compost because of the way they're set. So there is so much going on in those subcommittees. My life is just dotted with meetings, every single one of which I enjoy. So.
Okay, wonderful. Pollinators?
We have recently met with the staff who work on the golf courses, particularly the Monarchs in the Rough group, and had a great conversation about their methods, which you know, Shannon, very well, of establishing the pollinator supporting areas there, and talked with them about potentially starting with Shannon's idea, not on golf courses, but elsewhere in some of the city parks, Shannon's idea to have test patches of other than turf grass options. So that's something that will kind of work forward, and we'll be in touch with you, Shannon, for some more questions about potential species to use in such things. And we are continuing to work with the pollinator ambassadors, who are going to be establishing I don't know if it's a kiosk or a table at farmers market to provide information. So that's kind of their focus right now. So that's really about it at the moment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Rita. Okay, so the next, so council. Oh no, other commissions. Sorry, Energy Commission. John.
Yes, the last Energy Commission meeting featured a presentation by the Rocky Mountain Institute on electrification of the built environment and its benefits, opportunities, and of course, some challenges. Just a couple things that I'd like to point out. One thing that I found was interesting, they indicated that there was a survey of Ann Arbor done fairly recently where 22% of the homes in Ann Arbor are using electrical resistance heating, I assume in baseboard heating, and that is extremely expensive. So hopefully that can be an area that we target for conversion to heat pumps. Obviously, we also want to do that in all new construction. We talked about moving away from gas cooktops to induction cooktops. where there is substantial health benefits, particularly for children, because of the controlled pollutants that are given off, in addition, obviously, to the greenhouse gases, and then also some safety benefits. So for new construction, and I know the Planning Commission has really been great allies in pushing that, in working with all developers, and we've had a number of successes on that front. The other thing that was presented was the so-called solar faithful model that the city actually, Emily Drennan worked on that several years ago, and it's now fully launched. There's about 8 nonprofits, mostly houses of worship, that have employed that model, where basically investors invest in an installation of rooftop solar, have a PPA, purchase power agreement, with the host building, and are able to take advantage of the federal tax credits and accelerated depreciation that a nonprofit like a house of worship, or a parochial school for that matter, or any nonprofit that owns their own building. That was presented. I assume many of you know or are affiliated with a house of worship, or know someone in a house of worship. And if you know of a house of worship that doesn't have solar on its roof, they can contact me. I'm one of a little team that's trying to advance the solar faithful model, not only here in Michigan, but try to promote it nationally. So I just wanted to make a plug for that. And then just 2 other developments. We're going to be working in the transportation electrification group on trying to advance ideas for multifamily EV charging. There's a lot of people, obviously, in Ann Arbor that don't live in single family residences, and EV charging is really going to be a limitation unless they have it at their place of employment. And so we're going to try to work on solutions on that. First thing that we're actually going to try to do is work with U of M, and they have a off-campus housing listing. And right now, that's not meant, there's not any indication of whether there's EV charging or not. So hopefully that will just even raise awareness and start to get landlords, property owners to start thinking, oh, I need to indicate whether or not there's EV charging on my property, and that's going to be visible to potential renters. So hopefully that's a minor thing that we can do. And then lastly, the city, or I say the Office of Sustainability, is close to being able to bring to council a couple of things related to energy disclosure and benchmarking, both in the commercial and multifamily sector, and then shortly after that in the single family residence sector. At one time in the latter, we were looking at what we were calling a time of marketing disclosure. It looks apparently legally like that could be problematic, so it can be probably done at time of sale, which for some reason is legal, with maybe some carrots for doing it at the time of marketing, so that the buyer knows right away when they're looking at a house if there's energy efficiency related issues. So those are some of the things that are going on with the Energy Commission. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, John. How about Planning Commission? Shannon?
We continue to hammer away at transit-oriented zoning, so that still keeps getting worked on. But I've told you all about that before, and there's no like big, huge changes with that. I guess the only other thing that I feel like relates is that there was the first marijuana consumption facility for the state, actually, is going to be on, I think it's Ashley. And the marijuana industry is just, I think we've talked about this a couple of years ago, just super, super energy users. And as John kind of indicated, we don't have anything in the code, but we've been pretty proactive about just asking people to put solar on and things like that with mixed results, but they seem to actually pretty open to it. They have great southern exposure. They are very aware of the kind of bad reputation of the industry and see themselves as leaders in the industry. So we kind of asked them to step up. And so we don't know for sure, but I would say city council folks, if you don't see it, press them on it. And Lisa was there, so she knows. And so we just, again, we can't make them do anything, but we continue to just, work the channels that we can, basically standing up in front of a bunch of people virtually or in person or whatever it is, and asking them if they can do the right thing. So that's what our strategy has been so far. And we've gotten some response, actually. So, and other than that, I think we had that Joint Energy Commission meeting, which was really interesting. So I think that's really it in terms of crossover, unless Lisa, you remember anything that I'm forgetting. Okay.
Oh. Okay, well, thank you, Shannon. So Mike Apple isn't here, so we'll not talk about parks. So the next item is council. Kathy or Lisa? Kathy?
It's getting late, so I won't go into too much detail, but today was a really great day for the Gelman cleanup. There was a hearing before Judge Connors at 9 a.m. He did sign an order today directing Gelman to shall immediately implement and conduct all requirements and activities stated in the proposed Fourth Amendment and restated consent judgment. Gelman filed a brief as late as last night trying to interfere with the process, and I see Judge Connors being very determined that we're going to move forward with this. And the interveners are still a party to this case. There has been continuous effort to remove the interveners, that would be the elected officials, from this process, and just have it be between Eagle and Gelman, and we have prevailed. And so that again is good news. So I'm sure there'll be something in the council packet. The order is very short. It's less than a page long when you take off the names of all the lawyers that are being highly paid to continue this fight. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Anything that you want to add, Lisa? No? Okay. The chair, I don't have really anything I need to talk about tonight. So report from staff. Galen.
Yes, I like to announce next week we'll be celebrating 820 week. We have a host of events that are coming up. Please check out our website for dates. We're adding things. I think we have a mural that'll be unveiled. We have the recognition ceremony. We have a whole host of items. We're really excited. This will be in celebration of the 1-year anniversary of the passing of the 820 plan. So we're looking forward to it. Come out and join us whenever you can.
I will. All right, and thank you, Galen. So let's see. So action items. I have 2 written down here that Kathy and Rita are going to continue to work on the MS4 response resolution, and we may have we'll see when we bring it up at a meeting. It'll either be our next regular meeting or a special meeting, depending on the timing necessary. And then the second action item I have is that Chris Graham and the Natural Features Group will continue to work on their ordinance change to preserve natural features and heritage tree. So let's see. So our next scheduled meeting, is there any other items that people would like to discuss next month? Bob.
So I bring this up with considerable hesitation, but if I understand correctly, I think that funding for the deer cull was removed in the budgeting process. And I don't think this body has ever actually taken a position on that entire issue. We've talked about it from time to time, but I wonder if maybe it's time for just sort of an open-ended discussion on that. You know, are there alternatives?
No,
should we ask the council to reconsider? You know.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Bob. I know council meetings have been contentious when this topic comes up, so it might be a good idea for us to bear some of that burden. You know, next month. Let's see. I see a couple of hands up. Chris Graham and then Rita.
So the issue is education of council members at least, and maybe a broader segment of people in the city. The Environmental Commission, going back to the beginnings of this controversy, has been reluctant to be involved in the discussion because it was so intensely controversial. Council members who led the effort had unbelievable volumes of scathing, threatening, awful email from all over the world for their action to kill deer in Ann Arbor. And members of the Environmental Commission, and most notably Matt Nod, did not want to get in the middle of that. The controversy is much less now. Those who pay attention, I think, are pretty well aware the Humane Society is really oriented toward pets, and deer are not pets. And wildlife is the responsibility of the Department of Natural Resources and nobody else. And we are working on natural features in Ann Arbor, most particularly the regeneration of our forests, our native forests, which won't happen if the deer population gets out of hand again. We haven't fully gotten it in hand when we stopped year before last.
Well, I think it's worth a discussion in this forum now.
Well, if you're willing, we can do it, and be very facilitating for very careful and expert testimony and a whole lot of channels for you.
Okay, Bob. You and I could help you work on outside speakers and whatever you might have in mind. Okay. All right, Rita, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to thank Bob for bringing up that issue. I think it's great for us to discuss it, and thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or suggestions for our next meeting? No, I don't hear any. So our next item on the agenda is the next scheduled meeting will be June 24th, the fourth Thursday of June at 7 p.m. as usual, as regularly scheduled, unless stated otherwise. Before then. Now we reach our second period of public commentary. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 1-888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 943-248-64034. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And be patient, there can be a delay of up to 30 seconds before a connection is established. So again, please call 888-788-0099 99 and enter meeting ID 943-248-64034. Is there anybody on the line, Galen?
We have one caller with a question, with commentary. Caller 534, go ahead. Caller 534, go ahead and speak.
Hello, this is Tom Stallberg calling again. First off, I want to thank you for being brave and taking up the deer call issue. It's been contentious. It is important. So you're being brave, but I thank you for taking that step. I want to talk about the ADU issue again. I want to thank you for having the discussion. That's what we're asking for, is to have a discussion about this. I do want to make some corrections to the corrections on the numbers presented. We really are talking about 21,000 new situations. Currently, you have to be an owner occupant of one of the two structures to have an ADU. That's being removed from all 21,000. That's a difference that did not exist before. So I think it's disingenuous to suggest that there's a smaller number of impacted residences. Also, currently, under the current ordinance, you can't build a brand new constructed habitable unit in your backyard if you don't already have a detached structure. It doesn't have to be habitable. It could be a garage. If you don't currently have a detached structure, you can't build a new detached. You could build an attached ADU to your house, which would be within the building envelope. So we are talking not about 5,000 or whatever small number. We are talking about 20,000 plus. I don't know how many have a detached garage, but let's say around 20,000 units, where now you can build a detached unit in your backyard where you couldn't before. So I don't have the exact number, but it's way more than what people are trying to imply. And now you combine those two things and you've got a different situation. An investor can buy for cash a single family home, say a 900 square foot home on a standard R1C lot, and put an 800 square foot detached second rental unit in the backyard. The combination of these two new items that really are more than just a few thousand, they're for 20,000 residences, create new incentives and new situations and new conditions. Cash investors will buy up modest homes, make it even more difficult for modest home buyers to be able to buy in Ann Arbor. Somebody who's currently a renter who's trying to buy in Ann Arbor has enough challenges doing that. This will reduce the number of opportunities for a modest home purchase in Ann Arbor, and it will drive the prices on the bottom end of the market, however high they seem to be now. They're going to skyrocket up because cash investors are going to shut out homeowners on the low end of the market. And where are these homeowner wannabes going to go? They're going to go into the townships and commute back for work. We already have the large home builders of the area, Pulte, Toll Brothers, Norfolk, building in the townships. Robertson Brothers is going to be building both inside, they're all building inside the city and outside the city in the townships. There's going to be something up at Territorial and Whitmore Lake Road, perhaps, just passing through that township process. We are accelerating driving people out of town to commute back in by this. So I know you've already made your decision for tonight. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. What I want to do is point out this discussion is being had by less than 1% of the impacted residences. 20,000, 1% is 200. I was at both those public hearings. There was less than 200 people, and the people there, for the most part, are the people who are pretty wonky about this on both sides of the issues, the people who are already paying attention. Most of the 21,000 residences have no clue that this ordinance is more than trying to get some more granny flats so people can age in place or have family members living there. They have no clue about the compounding of the different variables that are being introduced in this residence. So please, Be open and honest in the discussions about the true number of people that are being impacted on this. So when this gets to council, I'll be very disappointed if I hear people trying to downplay the impact of this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your statement, Mr. Stolberg. Is anybody else on the line, Galen?
Let me check real quick. I'm gonna say no. Wait a minute. Okay, we have another caller from 464, caller 464. Go ahead and speak. Caller 464.
They seem to be muted.
I asked them to unmute.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. This is Linda Barauer. A couple things. I tried to call in the meeting at 7 o'clock, and the number was, the ID number for the meeting was incorrect on the agenda. I usually go by the top of the agenda because I only use my phone. I don't use a TV or a laptop, and I was very disappointed because I was on hold. It kept saying the meeting hasn't started yet, and then it cut me off, and I dialed in again, and it said the meeting hasn't started yet, and I was in the waiting room. And it wasn't until a friend emailed me the correct ID that I was able to get in the meeting. So I wasn't able to speak earlier. And I just want to bring that to your attention because it might have been correctly listed under the meeting information on Legistar, but on the agenda it was not. And those two numbers really need to match so that people who want to call in have the right information. So I just ask you to be more careful with that in the future. And then I want to just say something. I want to thank Council Member Griswold and Commissioner Mitchell for bringing the resolution forward, even though you didn't vote on it, the resolution about the Gelman violation of the multi-system stormwater pipeline, the Allen Creek pipeline running through West Park and the neighboring areas. And I'm really glad that you're going to bring it to council's attention, and I hope that you will tweak it in whatever way is necessary, but eventually pass that to give some strength to the cities standing up to Gelman. They really need to fix that violation of that multi-stormwater system permit. And finally, about ADUs, I do want to say, I understand I know it's going to be passed at the next council meeting, but I do want to respond to something Councilmember Dish said. And I respect the reasons for wanting this to happen, and I can understand that there's arguments for density, et cetera. But I really take issue with something Councilmember Dish said, that, well, don't worry about it because very few people are going to use it. And that, to me, is a horrible reason for saying something's okay. I mean, either an ordinance is good policy or it's not. Even if it doesn't affect many people or many units, if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. And it should never be used as an excuse. Well, don't worry about it. It's not going to affect many units or many people. That just, please don't use that as a rationale. But thank you for all your work on all of these complex issues. And keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the observations. Is there anybody else on the line, Galen?
No, and I want to say to the caller, that was my fault, and I apologize too. So.
Yeah, it was a glitch we discovered just before the meeting, so we'll be careful to check that earlier. So, if there are nobody else on the line for public comment, I declare this meeting adjourned at 10 p.m. Thank you, everybody. See you later.